Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started. See another sunrise, sing a little song. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader podcast. It's so good to have you. All the folks who have been joining us in the last couple of months, very special welcome to you. Thanks for finding us and tuning in. I always want to encourage people, leave us a review, help other people find us. And what Jesse and I are trying to do is just to be a resource and encouragement to all of you pastors and church leaders out there, because it's tough out there, man. There's so much, it's so hard being a pastor.
Yeah, it is.
And we have to navigate so many things all the time.
Yep.
And we're expected to do so much. We're expected to be spiritual leaders, shepherds, chaplains, leadership experts, fundraisers, all these things that you probably didn't go to seminary to do. So in a world that is just challenging isn't even the word for it, right? So
it's a lot.
It's a wonderful way to live, in my opinion, in that we get to partner with God and what God's doing through the local church in the world. But man, does it take it out of you, doesn't it?
It's a worthwhile thing to spend your life on. It's like, there's a purpose to it, I hope. And part of why we wanted to talk shop is to know that we're not alone in the leadership challenges that come from being a pastor in the local church. And so, for 441 episodes, Jason, we've been riffing on themes and talking to guests and, in the trenches and just talking shop on the church because we think it matters. We believe that deeply. And we want to not only be thriving in our own leadership, you and I, but to encourage other pastors and leaders to do the same and to be encouraged by you all listening in. And it's so much fun when we get to have a conversation or get an email or whatever, and we're just kind of in it together. So I'm grateful to be a part of it. And what a fun thing that we've been talking shop for so long.
Yeah. And so we started last week just kind of riffing on this list that Lifeway Research did, or there was an article by Lifeway in January 2026 about the ministry trends of 2026. So there were 12 trends, and really just that churches ought to be paying attention to them to kind of learn, what's going on with their congregations and who they're trying to reach in their communities. And again, we talked, it's like kind of grabbing a virtual coffee with us. So pastors, if you've got coffee, it's right. Smoke them if you got them kind of thing. But no, but I don't know. That didn't really work. But get some coffee, and it's really just we're talking through these. We did 1 through 6, and we do 7 through 12 here today as a way of just kind of sparking ideas, reflecting on sort of an up periscope moment on where we are in culture and church and everything in this time between Easter and summer and maybe what's next for us. So
that's right. Yeah.
If you're down for that, and you're going to be down for this episode.
Yeah. And don't miss number 13. I don't know if we're going to do this for sure, but we were like, there's a 13th one.
I think we should. We'll save it.
So stay tuned. We'll save that for the end. We'll tease it up for next time. But we're talking these 12, but we think there's a 13th. So don't miss that one.
Yeah. Okay. So hang in there. That was a nice teaser to stay.
I thought so. It's like a hook. We got it.
That was good. I like that. Okay. So this is number 7. Gen Z has a complicated religious outlook. This resonates with me. So basically, Pew Research, and I would say also Ryan Burge, if you know who Ryan Burge is, who does a lot of church. And I think Ryan has a book coming out as well. But basically, they're putting the kibosh on kind of the over exuberance. Gen Z is now they're all becoming Christians, and they're turning to faith, and they're moving the needle on faith in America. And actually, both Pew Research and Ryan Burge would say not so fast. They said there's no clear evidence that this kind of nationwide religious resurgence is underway. That a lot of the information's anecdotal. Mm-hmm. And yet, in this same post, it says, after years of younger generations growing increasingly secular, religious identification has been remarkably steady for Gen Z over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
what do we make of all this? Again, we've made a lot of Gen Z on the podcast, and I'll stand by it. What I am seeing in our culture and what I am seeing in our particular culture of Tower Hill is a complete surge of Gen Zers, the oldest of whom are in their late 20s and the youngest who are still in high school, searching for and finding Jesus and trying to figure out how to live out their faith in the world. I'm seeing that. I can't deny it. It's absolutely happening everywhere. So is it a Northeast phenomenon? Is it a phenomenon of this area of New Jersey? Am I only seeing the reports out of little pockets of resurgence? I don't know the answer to those questions, but I am seeing a huge, huge move in Gen Z, even in my own kids.
Yeah. No, I would resonate with that too, Jason. I actually think it's interesting because for a while there, we kind of had, and every so often 20 something will come and get involved in the life of the church and whatnot. And yet I say the last maybe year or so, like every week, I'm like, who is this and why are they here? Like, I mean, how did you find us? What are you doing? But there's this younger crowd that is showing up increasingly. So again, that's anecdotal. You're experiencing that. I am. We've heard that from other pastors and church leaders. So I don't know, maybe they're not answering on these surveys or like.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe the surveys haven't caught up.
Yeah, I don't know. But I would say here at Marine View, it's not like a flood of young people coming in, but it's a noticeable difference in the number. Like it's like every week we're like, that's a 20 something. They're new. And I don't know. So I'm still figuring out what that means and whether that's a long-term sustainable thing or what, but it's definitely something we've noticed. So
yeah,
maybe the jury's still out on Gen Z, but we're noticing something that's a little different than the attendance patterns of maybe the millennials. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and even with, so we my wife and I personally, but also we as a church support Fellowship of Christian Athletes in the area. My son is heavily involved as an 11th grader, and they had their big banquet for Monmouth and Ocean. Actually, it was all of New Jersey, their celebration banquet. And Monmouth County in New Jersey here, they continue to grow so much that they keep needing to raise money to add new staff members. They get FCA huddles in more and more high schools and middle schools all over the state.
Sure.
They've never seen it like this before. And it's really cool with the student athletes who are part of FCA. Part of the banquet is they send them out and they go around all the tables in this giant ballroom of a hotel and they just tell their faith stories and how God has used FCA in their lives. And it's very, very powerful. And every year we've gone, so I would say we've gone maybe 5 times over the last 10 years to this banquet. I've never seen it this packed and have this many kids represented. So something's happening. Yeah. Something's definitely happening in our schools, everywhere. So
yeah.
So I guess in fairness,
in
fairness, they said Gen Z has a complicated religious outlook. That's probably right.
Sure.
But I don't want to poo-poo it and say, you know what, well, there's no resurgence happening or there's no
draws us back to the first one last week about Christianity's no longer in decline. Well, how do these two work together? Because if that's true, Gen Z would need to be a big part of that, I think. So still, maybe more to be found out about that in the coming years.
Yeah. But I'd say this, one thing, I had the chance to speak with a couple of churches since last time, since Easter.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I've been asked more than once was, what happens if your church doesn't have a lot of Gen Zers? How do you support and reach them? Well, find organizations like Athletes InterVarsity and Fellowship of Christian Athletes and Young Life and whatever it is, to send resources to help fund those ministries that do have a reach into those communities. It doesn't mean don't ever do stuff in your own church. Of course, you want to try to build what you can, but at the same time, find these organizations that are crushing it with young people and give them more resources because they are stewarding it well. All right, next, number 8, church attendance growth may be driven by men.
It's very non-committal.
Right.
I like that.
Right. That's kind of funny, isn't it?
That's right.
It may be.
Maybe.
I don't know. It says around half, 52% of congregations increased their worship service attendance by at least 4% in the past 2 years, according to Lifeway. Much is likely, they say, from COVID bounce back. Some of that seems like a long time ago, but
Sure.
Maybe that's true. But that it does seem like particularly younger men, which again, this is a little bit of a butting heads with the previous one.
Sure.
That Gen Z men are coming back to church in a different way than Gen Z women are disengaging from church, is all the kind of reporting we're hearing all over the place now. Again, that has not been my experience anecdotally. But I have definitely seen, and I've heard others, and there have been lots of articles about like the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
We know some young men who started going to the Orthodox Church. Yeah. They're really wanting to get that traditional, even more liturgical style of worship. We've seen kind of groups who are interested in this, and I think it's always a reaction from the previous generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
totally is, yeah.
So the the World War II generation, they had a very traditional model of church, and so the baby boomers, rebelled and largely wanted their own. And anyway, that's how we get contemporary worship movement. Then you have a lot of these Gen Zers who grew up in contemporary churches are rebelling against that. Like, oh, there's going to be something more. Yeah. Or I find it more meaningful to go back. So who knows? But I think it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, well, we've noticed we have a couple guys that are driving down from Seattle, University of Washington. They grew up in the church, but they're coming home to church every weekend. And I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, I mean, I don't ask them like that, but it's just kind of fascinating to me, right? And all that. And so, yeah, I think there is something of that that's anecdotally true. Again, what the numbers, we'll see what the story tells. And then move back towards tradition. We had a young man who came and spoke at his mother's funeral. She, I think late 40s and passed away kind of tragically. And he spoke on behalf of half of the family. And they're not really a church family, but he got really involved in the Greek Orthodox Church and came and shared some things from his time and experience there, and is really connected there. And I'm fascinated by it. I mean, here's a young guy, he's 19, like what was appealing about it? What drew you to that? And I do think there is something of a reaction to, generational trends or whatever. And I remember you and I were at the North Point, the Drive conference. This was a while back. And I think Andy Stanley or one of the guys there said, we met the moment when this generation needed something different than the church that, their parents were a part of, those traditional churches. And so the warehouse church was the thing that became the baby boomer expression of church and worship and how we were going to connect it with God. And then he said, I think this was like maybe 2016 or 17, something like, I wonder what the next iteration will be. Because it is that generational move that kind of happens. So maybe it's a trend back towards something of a traditional expression, but I would guess in the context of technology and some of the stuff that we rely on for our worship today. So I don't know. I've got more questions than answers.
Same.
Curious to see.
But even look at like the Passion Conference every year, and thousands and thousands and thousands of college kids.
Sure, yeah.
And it's about as contemporary as can be. So it's just interesting. Like,
so which is it? Maybe it's some of both, or depends on who you ask, probably, right?
Yeah. But here's my takeaway about young men, coming back to church or wanting a more traditional expression is maybe those things that we think weren't going to work anymore as far as traditional discipleship models. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to reinvestigate those things and think, well, maybe there's something to this. I think the other thing is men really desire a sense of adventure. Mm-hmm. And how do we build that in? If more men are coming, how do we build in more opportunities to really, where Christianity isn't just this kind of passive, I come to church and I receive, but rather what is it that I'm going to do? Yeah. So anyway, a lot to think about. See, this is what I mean. Yeah. This sparks a lot of different ideas as we talk about these things.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Okay, number 9. Pastors face theological confusion among Americans and churchgoers. Again, not particularly shocking.
It's a true statement.
That there's significant confusion around core Christian doctrines like the Trinity, for example.
Yeah.
I will say I did see a particularly appalling one of these on social media this week. A pastor, I'm not going to say it because I don't remember what church it was or what denomination, but she got up and said that teachings, a lot of the teachings in the New Testament are problematic and should be ripped out. And we need a third testament. And if you don't agree with it, that is outrageous, then you're probably listening to the wrong podcast.
Oh man.
But no wonder there's so much theological confusion when where are they getting any sort of clarity? And this makes me think about, as much as I hate the idea of being more visible online, I do think, where the younger generation hangs out online, is there some sort of way to offer some theological teaching so that they can experience it? Because for most of them, I mean, the phone is a seamless part of our lives now, and especially for younger generations. I mean, that's where they're getting almost all their content, right, wrong, or whatever. How do we leverage that and maybe do some theological teaching? I don't know. People have been trying to convince me to post on TikTok, that sort of thing. And I just shudder at the thought.
Yeah.
Because I'm just not, that's not exciting to me. That's terrifying. But I think there's something we need to think about with that, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a challenging world to navigate with so much information. There's so much information available that it's hard to know what to trust or to, I don't know. It's a unique challenge. And so do we throw another voice into the midst of all that information, or do we steward the handfuls of people that God sends our way and try to lead them in the way they should go and have a faithful understanding of theology and scripture? And, so I think maybe it's some of both, a voice in the marketplace and a voice in the church to really cultivate deeper understanding. But I think there is something of a call. This kind of speaks back to what we were just talking about, but to how are we helping people onboard the foundational beliefs of the Christian faith that are rooted in 2,000 years of tradition and interpretation, and ultimately in God's word. And in some ways, maybe we need to bring the flannel graph back and teach the 1, 2, 3.
If it's going to work, man, let's do it.
So it's like, I've told you before, if I thought wearing a robe in worship would help people know and follow Jesus, I would do it. And I don't wear a robe because I'm not convinced that's the case. But if you wear a robe,
we're not there yet.
Awesome, crush it. But for me, it's like, how are people learning the basics and the foundational things of Christian understanding? And in our Reformed tradition, is there a catechism of sorts that we can provide for people to give that foundation? So that's something we're thinking about and working on here, because like so many of our churches, probably yours, Jason, and so many of the pastors and leaders listening in, people are coming from a whole variety of theological backgrounds.
Yeah.
So even the church people that know some of the fundamentals are coming with all kinds of other perspectives or teaching that they maybe got. And so we're all kind of theological mutts in some ways and trying to sort through all that. So,
and one of the challenges with that I've noticed is that people really don't want to leave their theology behind.
Sure. Yeah.
So they're just always adding to it.
Mm-hmm.
Which creates more confusion sometimes.
Yeah. And so someone will come in maybe out of a Baptist tradition and they'll go, "You baptize infants? Like, how does that work?" I mean, it's an easy example, but then there is a lot of confusion around just sort of the sort of Nicene faith, if you will, and what is it? Just the basics even. So let's write a catechism and we'll call it the Reclaimed Catechism. And I don't know. We'll
That's great. Great name. They'll just fly off the shelves.
It's going to be great.
All right, number 10. Again, this is another, Number 10, economic uncertainty worries many pastors.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's a trend. Is that trend existed from the beginning of the church? Is that like
right? I mean,
2026.
I mean, certainly, this is something that, we feel very fortunate to be in a situation where we're not worrying if we're going to be able to stay open.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of churches that are, and that's that's a pressure for pastors. I can't even really imagine. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is.
And my heart breaks for pastors in that situation, because I know that if it were me, I'd have a hard time focusing on anything else. And I don't know, my survival grip on things would be so, I feel like I'd be walking around with a closed fist all the time, just nervous about it. But yeah, there's so much economic uncertainty. I mean, all of us are feeling it one way or another. And are we going to be able to accomplish those things that we've been dreaming about, that we feel like God's put before us? It seems like we put our faith out there, but then the bottom line doesn't seem to add up. What does that mean? What do we do? I get it. There's a lot of anxiety around this.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of the trends related to that too, generations and their patterns for giving and stewardship, and how do we understand it and teach it well, and all of that, alongside, for the younger generations, what it is a challenging economy for them to navigate. And so I don't know, it's a complex thing for us. And what does that mean for how we think about funding the church? I think it's a real question. That's probably a series of about 5 podcasts. Just
It is. And I do think part of it's just really paying attention to whatever systems behind your giving, your stewardship. We look at this every year. I feel like in some ways we're always trying to reinvent our messaging and think about how do we help people connect. And the biggest thing, and I really don't know that there's something better than this, but really trying to help people connect with the mission and the urgency of what you're doing as a church with giving of what God's blessed them with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Super important. And one last thought I'd throw into the mix there is just, I think sometimes when we're introducing an opportunity to give or something, just acknowledging, thank you for giving, in a time of economic uncertainty, it means a lot that we're in this together. So we don't take that lightly, and we're glad that we get to live out this mission and ministry together. So I think there's some ways to express maybe what's on everybody's hearts and acknowledge even some of the sacrificial giving that is taking place in that environment.
Yeah. And to be transparent about where the money's going.
Totally. Yeah.
So that people can feel confident that you're not squandering what they're giving so sacrificially. So, all right. Number 11, fewer Americans see religion as important in their daily lives. So even amongst Christians, it's interesting. 49% of Americans say religion has daily importance for them. So less than half. The lowest level since 2007, when Gallup first started tracking this. Interesting. It's almost that moralistic therapeutic deism version of God, where God's sort of God at a distance, or a divine butler, and if you need something, you ask. But other than that, I go about my daily life. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think there's something to that, Jason. I hear people say, I don't think this has always been true of people, and maybe they don't mean it quite this way, but they talk in terms of their faith being a part of their life and not the core of their identity. And I think that's always been a challenge, where it's like, yeah, God is a part of my life, but not the whole of my life. And of course, that's the journey of discipleship for so many of us. But yeah, it's, that's kind of disheartening to hear if more Americans more of us are just saying, I dabble in that, or it's there, but it's not the focus of my life. That is discouraging.
Yeah. And it shows that, kind of circling back to discipleship, is a discipleship problem.
Yeah.
There's some sort of disconnect and I will say this, for all the things that we're really happy about the way things are going at Tower Hill, there are some things that we're concerned about. There definitely is a bit of the transactional, we come to church and we receive religious goods and services, but we're not particularly involved.
Yeah.
And which nobody's happy about, but it's a reality. It's a reality. So I think church can feel transactional, and God, I pray that you give me what I want. And, and if you do, then I'll be faithful. You know what I mean? Like, again, it becomes very transactional. So I don't know, but I think what does this mean for us as churches is we have to consider this as we're developing messages and we're thinking about scriptures and how to present the life of faith in a way that acknowledges that it's not just a slice of the pie, it's the whole pie.
Right. Yeah. Or even I think in your practical application, it's like where does real faith intersect with real life in the real world? And
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes where I'll look at a series or a couple of sermons I've preached, and I'm like, I've given them good theology and even some implications, but the intersection of real life and real faith, what does this mean for me when I'm standing in the line at the grocery store or on the road or dealing with my kids or navigating marriage or facing, retirement and uncertainty about my finances? Like, so finding ways to really bring those things together so that faith really is something that people look to in the midst of their real life rather than going, oh, that'll be nice when I need it someday or whatever. So I don't know, more work to be done on that front.
Yeah. All right. 12. And this, again, this almost feels contradictory, but it says Americans' trust in the church rebounds slightly.
Slightly.
I thought this was kind of a funny one. So 36% of Americans have some level of trust in the church, it sounds like, which is up from 31% in 2022. So,
wow.
Yay.
It's better than 32, I guess. This is right there with that pastor trust level at 30% or whatever. That's pretty tough, man. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's a reality, like what's that come from and what are we going to do about it?
I have an uncle who's very outspoken politically on Facebook, who sadly I had to snooze for a while.
Yeah.
I dearly love him. And he was one of the reasons why I snoozed him is because he doesn't say a lot of nice things about the church. I don't think he really doesn't really like the church. And I'm like, dude, what? Your nephew's a pastor. But he was saying something about why he thought churches should be taxed. And of course, he's thinking about he's always kind of against Joel Osteen and churches like
sure.
that. Yeah. And I took the bait and I was DMing him and I'm just like, hey, these we give away from our church, we give away about $250,000 a year to local missions and missions all over the world, and supporting, it's going out the door. And if we were taxed, that would severely hinder the amount of money that we would be able to help our community with. And his response was, well, it would still be a tax-free gift on people's income statement. And I'm like, you don't understand what I'm talking about. But this all comes from a place of not trusting the church because the church has behaved badly.
Yeah.
Some churches have behaved badly. And so I just always think about him, and that makes me very sad. But I think about, again, how do we build trust is if this all comes back to, again, an Andy Stanley thing about endearing yourself to the community, or a North Point, endearing yourself. If the community loves you, if they realize that what you're doing in the community is irreplaceable, that if even though they would never come to church at your church, they are so glad you're there.
Yeah.
Because of all that you're doing. I think that is what helps us build trust. And I think that's the only trust that really matters, is the trust of our own communities.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. It goes back to the bishop question, ask my neighbors, are they glad I'm here or whatever? How's my faith going? And I think that's right. I mean, we've talked about this before. A good thought experiment with your leadership team is to say something like, what would our neighbors notice is missing if our church one day was just gone? Would they even notice? Would anything be different about their lives or this community? And it's a useful thought experiment just to kind of go, you know what? No, maybe we need to be doing more to impact our community so that people would miss us. Or you're like, you know what? Actually, these 5 things are unique things that we bring to our community, that we are making a difference and we are known. And so building trust maybe by thinking in terms of not just who's in the building and how you're discipling them, and as important as that is, but how are we reaching out to our community around us and being good neighbors in a way that kind of builds relationship and trust over time. So you're not going to win with everybody, but can you be winsome enough in your life that most people are like, I'm glad they're there. I might not believe like them or agree with them on a lot of things, but I'm glad they're there because they do these good things. So I don't know, just a couple thoughts.
Yeah. And then we teased we would do a 13th. All right. So this was not on the list. This was something that we feel like we have not really addressed. And I think the time has come. We're going to need to really do a deep dive on this. And that is the rise of AI in our culture and the possible implications of faith and life in America, in our churches. I mean, it's a big one that, you just can't ignore. It started out with almost like a parlor trick with Chat GPT. Write me a sermon with these notes. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really interesting. And but no pastor was going to take a Chat GPT sermon and try to preach it as their own. I don't think so.
Are you
but
sure?
As AI continues to, what are the ethics around it?
Yeah.
What's it going to mean? We are going to see, Jesse, at least in the marketplace, we're going to see such a huge change in business life in America because of AI. We've already started seeing it. What are the ethics and impact of AI on life of the church?
Yeah.
I think this is a really important question, and I think this is a trend that we all need to be paying attention to, which I think it would be easy to say, well, I don't really need to pay attention to that. But I don't think we realize how much AI has even already become a part of the fabric of culture.
Totally. Yeah.
And the way we do things, the way we interact with things. So I think to pretend it's not happening isn't very helpful. So what are some things that we can do? So I think I smell some future episodes we're going to be talking about this.
That's right.
I don't know. What are some of your initial thoughts on
Well, I need to disclose something to you today. This is actually an AI version of myself talking to you today. So I hope obviously not that, but I think there is a lot to wrestle with here. I mean, in a good way for us, how do we use this in the best sense as a tool for our mission and ministry? What can we do? Creating a sermon series logo in Chat GPT is way easier than trying to dream up something by yourself, right? So there's a lot of things that this is going to help us with, and maybe some shortcuts for administrative things. And where's the line crossed? And when it comes to the ethics of creative things, sermon writing or teaching or stuff like that. So curious to explore this more. And thinking back to that other part of our conversation, where does real faith intersect with real life? This is something that the people in our churches are dealing with on a daily basis too. So just even having a conversation about the wider implications, I think, is important. And being aware of any robots that show up impersonating us or coming from the future. And, I don't know. We'll see.
Skynet.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I will say something we are going to see in the next 5 years are the trend of, at least in the marketplace, people making sort of digital copies of themselves in a sense that so that an AI that's been trained by you could respond on your behalf. And it's not too far a bridge to say, will there be pastors who will, for the sake of efficiency and reach, create digital versions of themselves to respond on their behalf when people have questions, concerns, at a scale that you couldn't do otherwise?
Yeah.
And what are the implications of that?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's just a ton of questions. It goes way beyond, are we going to cheat on sermon writing or something?
That's right. It is that, but it's so much more. So anyway, we'll get into that topic number 13, trending in the last couple of years. So
that's right. All right. Well, hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this, virtual coffee as we are just kicking around these trends that we saw in Lifeway's report. I do appreciate that they write this, and I appreciate all the folks that are putting in all the work to write these trend posts, because I do think they're helpful. They're helpful thought exercises, in my opinion.
Yeah,
so
whether they were generated by AI or not.
Yeah, who knows? That'd be funny if they were. But anyway, thanks so much for listening, everybody. And we do hope that you know that what you're doing is such important work. And please, I know it's discouraging, and I know you grow weary and all of those things, but you are changing lives. The local church is the hope of the world, and you are part of that hope. So keep it up, Pastor. And reach out to us anytime, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. And until next time, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care.